She said it like she was testing herself more than me, like the words were supposed to build a wall she already knew I'd walk through. This is a fireable offense. Her voice was low, careful, but it trembled just enough to make me wonder if she meant the rules, or the way I was looking at her. It started a week earlier. I was helping her close up the small art studio on campus, paint-scented air, the hum of the old heater, late light pooling across her desk. She was 45, maybe, though it never felt right to measure her that way. There was a kind of stillness around her, like she'd learned how to breathe quieter than everyone else. She always wore her hair tied back, a strand loose against her cheek. The kind of detail that shouldn't matter, but did. I remember the first time she handed me a cup of tea after class. "You stayed late again," she said. "You'll start haunting this place." "Maybe it's the light," I said, pretending to look around. "It's the worst light in the building," she replied, smiling faintly. I didn't answer. Because it wasn't the light. Now, a week later, I was standing closer than I should have, close enough to see the thin line of silver in her hair, the faint paint smudge near her wrist. She noticed me looking. "You're quiet tonight," she said, rearranging brushes. "I don't have much to say. That's never stopped you before. I think you just never noticed when I did." Her hand stilled. A single brush rolled off the table and hit the floor. We both bent down at the same time, and that's when her hand brushed mine. Just a moment. Just skin. But something passed through the air between us, quiet and electric. She froze, eyes flicking up to mine. I swear the room got smaller, like the air had been taken out of it. Neither of us moved. "You should go home," she said softly. But she didn't step back. And I didn't either. Her perfume was faint, warm, sandalwood, maybe, and something I could never name. I could feel the heat from her arm, the pulse just beneath her collarbone. "You think I don't notice things," I said. "But I do." She looked up then, almost sharply. "What do you think you notice?" "That you keep pretending the rules are the only thing holding this place together." Her breath caught. A small, involuntary sound. "This," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is a fireable offense." And that's when I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it sounded like she was giving herself permission to break something sacred. "Then fire me," I said quietly. "Fire me for feeling something real." Her lips parted, not to speak, just to breathe. The silence was thick enough to touch. A drop of paint from her brush hit the floor, spreading into a dark bloom. She stared at it for a long time, as if it might save her from answering. Then the door handle clicked. We both turned. The janitor's key rattled in the lock, the sound slicing through the fragile moment. She stepped back, fast, the distance between us reappearing like a wound closing too quickly. "Go," she whispered. "Before someone sees." But I couldn't move. Not yet. Because her eyes, for one unguarded second, said everything her voice wouldn't. And I knew, whatever this was, it had already begun. I didn't see her for 3 days after that night. She cancelled class once, left the door locked the next. But I still came, pretending to work on my sketches, though mostly I just sat there, listening to the sound of the radiator ticking and wondering if she'd ever walk through the door again. When she finally did, she looked different. Not colder, just more composed, as if she'd rehearsed the distance between us. "You shouldn't be here this late," she said, setting her bag down. I smiled faintly. "Neither should you." That earned me the smallest exhale of a laugh, the kind that broke her guard for half a second. She looked tired, though, the kind of tired that didn't come from work. Her wedding ring was gone. I hadn't noticed until that moment. She followed my gaze, then folded her hands in front of her. "Divorced. 5 years now. Don't look at me like that, it's not a tragedy." "I wasn't," I said softly. "Just wondering if that's why you keep everything locked up." Her eyes flicked toward me, and for once, she didn't correct me. "I was married to a man who taught me how to be quiet," she said after a pause. "Now I can't seem to unlearn it." The words hung in the air, intimate in a way they shouldn't have been. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. I just moved closer, holding out her sketchbook she'd left behind last week. My fingers brushed hers when she took it. Neither of us pulled away. I shouldn't tell you these things, she murmured. Maybe that's why you should. She gave me a look, sharp, searching, the kind that made it hard to breathe. You're 24, right? 23. That's barely enough time to know what you want. Maybe, I said. But I know what I don't. And what's that? Pretending something isn't there when it is. She turned away, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, but her hand trembled slightly. I don't think you understand the risk, she whispered. I think I do. You just don't believe I'd take it. Silence again. The hum of the heater filled the space between us. Then she stepped forward, just one step, and reached for a brush on the table beside me. Her arm brushed my shoulder, slow, deliberate, unintentional in every way that felt intentional. Her breath grazed my cheek as she spoke. You make it sound simple. It could be, I said. She smiled, sad, knowing. You'll learn. Nothing real ever is. Her hand lingered there, fingers barely touching my sleeve. A moment stretched, fragile and heavy, before she pulled away. I'll see you tomorrow, she said, voice barely steady. But she didn't leave right away. She stood in the doorway, looking back once, long enough for me to know she'd felt it too. That invisible thread neither of us could name, now pulled tighter than ever. The next week, the air between us changed. It wasn't just tension anymore, it was awareness. Every shared glance carried something unsaid, every silence a question neither of us could afford to answer. I came in early to return a portfolio she'd lent me. She was already there, bent over a painting, sleeves rolled up, a faint streak of blue across her wrist. Her hair was looser today, like she'd stopped trying to appear untouchable. You don't have to bring that back so soon, she said without looking up. I couldn't wait. Impatient, she murmured. That'll get you in trouble. I almost told her that some trouble was worth it, but the words died in my throat when she looked up. Her gaze lingered just a little too long. She reached for the portfolio, fingers brushing mine. You really should stop looking at me that way. I can't, I said quietly. Her breath hitched, just enough to betray her composure. You think this is a game? No. That's the problem. The room felt too small again. Her scent, paint and something faintly floral, wrapped around me like static. The distance between us evaporated. Then her phone buzzed. She flinched, pulling back as if caught. The screen lit up. Call from Dean Walters. Her expression changed, professionalism snapping back into place. You should go, she said, reaching for the phone. Now. I didn't move. Does he know? She froze. Know what? That you're not as detached as you pretend to be. Her lips parted, then pressed shut again. She turned the phone face down, the call still buzzing against the table. Don't say things you'll regret, she whispered. Too late. Her eyes softened, not pity, not warning, something else. Something like surrender. Then the door creaked open. Professor Hale? A voice called. One of her colleagues, male, mid-30s, holding a stack of papers. She stepped back so fast the stool behind her scraped the floor. Yes, Marcus? She said, steadying her tone. Dean wanted me to drop these off. He mentioned your assistant, he's just leaving. She cut in quickly. I grabbed my bag, muttering a polite thanks. As I passed her, her fingers brushed the back of my hand, an instinct, a silent apology. The door closed behind him, leaving us in the echo of what almost happened. Her voice was barely audible. Do you see now why this can happen? Yeah, I said, my pulse still uneven. But I also see that it already is. She turned, slow, conflicted, eyes tracing the space between us as if it had shape. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she took one small step toward me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath, the tremor of restraint. We didn't kiss. We didn't have to. The air did it for us, charged, waiting, holding us hostage in the space between what was right and what felt inevitable. Rain came down in sheets that night, the kind that blurred the world into silence. She was still in the studio, lights low, a single lamp catching her face in gold. I hesitated at the door, half-drenched, debating whether to knock at all. But when she looked up and saw me through the glass, she didn't turn me away. "Locked out again?" she asked softly, pulling the door open. "Of the storm, yeah," I said. "Not sure about everything else." Her laugh was faint, tired. "You shouldn't be here. I could say the same about you." She sighed but didn't argue. The air inside was warm, heavy with turpentine and the scent of rain-soaked wool. Her sweater clung slightly to her wrist, and when she pushed her hair back, I watched a single drop of rain roll from her temple to her jaw. "Stop looking at me like that," she murmured. "Like what?" "Like you're trying to remember me." I took a step closer. "Maybe I am." She turned away, but I could see her chest rise, sharp and shallow. "You don't understand what this would cost me. I'm not asking for anything you don't already feel." That was the moment she broke. Her hand hit the edge of the table, not in anger, but to steady herself. "You think this is easy? You think I don't?" She stopped, the word catching in her throat. "Don't what?" I asked, softer now. She shook her head, eyes glistening with something between fury and longing. "You're too young to carry something like this." "Then let me." She stared at me, and in that silence everything that had been restrained began to slip. When I reached up, my hand brushed a strand of hair from her face. She didn't move. Her eyes closed, not in surrender, but in recognition. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "You have no idea what you're doing to me." "Tell me," I said. She turned her head slightly, my fingers still near her jaw, and for a breath, there was nothing but the sound of rain against the windows, our breathing almost synchronized. Her hand found my arm, not to push me away, but to anchor herself. The warmth of her touch burned through the thin fabric of my shirt. Then she leaned in, slow, uncertain, her forehead nearly touching mine. Every inch between us felt electric, unbearable. "I can't," she whispered, trembling. "You already are." She exhaled shakily, her lips barely an inch from mine. For that suspended moment, time seemed to fold, the storm outside, the rulebook, the distance, all dissolving into the single question that had been waiting since the first night. Then, a sudden knock at the door. We both froze. Her eyes darted toward the sound, panic, heartbreak, everything at once. The knock came again, harder this time. And before she moved, before either of us spoke, she whispered, barely audible, "This was never supposed to happen." The next morning, the studio felt wrong, too bright, too quiet. She wasn't there when I arrived. Her mug sat cold on the counter, half-finished tea, a lipstick stain fading against porcelain. I set my bag down, my chest still tight from the night before, that almost kiss still echoing in my pulse. Then the door opened. She stepped in, her hair still damp from the rain, eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept. But it wasn't exhaustion I saw. It was fear. "We need to talk," she said. The words landed heavy. I straightened. "About last night?" "About everything." She closed the door, locked it, and turned to me. "Someone saw us." My heart dropped. "Who?" "Marcus. He came back for his keys." I swallowed hard. "What did he see?" "Enough," she whispered. "Enough to ask questions." The silence after that was deafening. I stepped forward, trying to meet her eyes, but she flinched back like the air between us burned. "He said he might tell the dean," she continued, voice shaking. "He thinks you're, what?" Her jaw tightened. "Involved." The word hung between us, dangerous and intimate. She pressed her palms against her forehead. "This can't happen again. I should have stopped it earlier. You didn't want to. That doesn't make it right." She turned, pacing, her movements restless. Every brush of her sleeve, every exhale seemed louder now. What are you so afraid of? I asked. Losing everything, she said, looking up sharply. My job. My reputation. The life I built after it all fell apart once already. There it was, the truth she'd never said out loud. I took a step closer. He can say what he wants. We know what it wasn't. Her eyes narrowed. You think that matters? I think what matters is that it was something. She blinked, trembling slightly, her hand tightening on the back of a chair. You shouldn't talk like that, she said softly, then stopped listening. Her breath caught, half gasp, half warning, as I moved closer. She didn't back away this time. Our shoulders brushed. The contact was brief but felt like confession. Then she spoke, so quietly I almost missed it. He wasn't wrong, you know. I froze. What do you mean? She looked at me, really looked, and for the first time there was no guard, no teacher, no pretense. I tried to tell myself I was protecting you, she said, voice trembling. But maybe I was just protecting how you make me feel. Her hand reached up, almost unconsciously, brushing against my chest, then retreating just as fast. The contact left heat in its wake, unbearable. So what now? I whispered. She hesitated, eyes darting toward the locked door, then back at me. No, she said slowly. We stop pretending we can walk away clean. For a heartbeat, we just stood there, breath to breath, either brave enough to close the space, either willing to break it. Something irreversible had just shifted. And I knew, whatever came next, we'd already crossed the line. The storm had passed, but inside the studio, the air still carried its echo. Late lights spilled across the floor, catching the dust in slow, golden spirals. She stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at nothing. I could tell she'd been there a while, thinking, rehearsing, retreating. When I entered, she didn't turn. I told the dean, she said finally. Her voice was steady, but too calm. That nothing happened. That the rumors were false. I waited for relief to come. It didn't. Was that the truth? I asked. She turned then, eyes tired, lips trembling just slightly. It was the version that keeps us both safe. Safe, I repeated, stepping closer. That's not what this feels like. She laughed softly, almost breaking. You still don't understand how dangerous this is. Maybe I do, I said, closing the distance until I could see my reflection in her eyes. Maybe that's why I'm still here. She shook her head. You should be angry. Or scared. Something. I am, I said quietly. But not of you. Her breath hitched. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she whispered, You shouldn't look at me like that. Then stop looking back. That did it. The silence collapsed between us. She stepped forward suddenly, her hands gripping the edge of my shirt, not to pull me in, but to steady herself. Her forehead brushed mine. The contact was so small it hurt. I hate that you make me feel this alive, she murmured. Then hate me, I said. But don't pretend it isn't real. Her fingers trembled against my chest, tracing the outline of a heartbeat she wasn't supposed to hear. For a moment, the world narrowed, just breath and pulse, her perfume and the sound of her whisper. This will ruin me, she said. No, I whispered. This will remind you you're still human. Her lips parted, a breath away, a single confession from closing the distance. And then she stopped. Tears glistened in her eyes, unfallen. She exhaled hard, pulling her hands back, breaking the magnetic pull that had kept us suspended for weeks. Don't make this harder than it already is, she said, her voice cracking just once. I'm not the one running. She turned away, gripping the edge of the desk, shoulders tense. You think this is courage, she said, barely audible. It's not. It's selfish. You still have years ahead of you. I've already spent mine surviving mistakes like this. I stepped closer, slow, deliberate, until I was standing behind her, close enough for her to feel the warmth of my breath at her neck. I don't want perfect, I said. I just want honest. Her eyes closed. A single tear slipped free. For a second, she leaned back, almost, and then caught herself. When she turned around, her expression had changed. Something resigned. Something peaceful. "You're going to remember me," she said softly. "I already do." She smiled, fragile, real. "Then let that be enough." And she walked out, leaving the door open, the scent of rain and turpentine still hanging in the air. Proof that something real had happened, even if it couldn't stay. It was a week before I saw her again. The studio felt hollow without her, like the air itself had stopped waiting. The brushes were cleaned, her desk cleared, even the faint trace of her perfume was gone. I told myself she'd moved on, that maybe she'd transferred, resigned, or done the thing she always did best, disappear before anyone could see her heart break. Then one evening I found her. She was sitting on the bench just outside the building, coat wrapped around her, the sky burning orange with sunset. She looked smaller somehow, but calm, like the storm had finally passed through her. "I thought you left," I said. "I tried," she replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Didn't get very far." I sat down beside her. The air was cool, still carrying a trace of rain. She didn't move away this time. For a while, we said nothing. Just the sounds of the city, distant laughter, tires on wet pavement, the slow settling of dusk. "I kept thinking about what you said," she murmured finally. "About being honest. And I realized I've spent most of my life mistaking fear for wisdom." Her voice trembled on the last word. I turned to her, watching how the light touched the curve of her jaw, the soft silver in her hair. "You were never afraid of me," I said quietly. "You were afraid of what you felt." She looked at me then, really looked. No defenses, no distance. "I'm not anymore." It was such a simple sentence, but it carried everything she couldn't say before, all the restraint, the guilt, the longing. I reached for her hand. She hesitated for just a second before letting her fingers slide between mine. The warmth of her skin was real, grounding, fragile in its steadiness. We sat like that for a long moment, her head leaning lightly against my shoulder, my thumb tracing small, aimless circles across her hand. No one was watching. No rules to break. No lines to cross. Just two people who finally stopped pretending they didn't want to be seen. "You're still too young," she said softly. "Maybe," I replied. "But I'm old enough to mean this." She looked up, searching my face for something, doubt, hesitation, anything that would make it easier to pull away again. But there wasn't any. So she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against mine. The simplest gesture. The most human one. And for the first time, she didn't stop herself. We stayed like that until the streetlights came on, neither of us speaking, both knowing this was the only ending that made sense. Not a confession. Not a goodbye. Just a quiet beginning that finally felt real. When she finally stood, she didn't say, "We can't." She just whispered, "See you tomorrow." And I knew she meant it.